So important. The series that we're in is really important because there are things in your life that we need to stop fighting, and we need to determine what actually is valuable and worth fighting for. Taking this out of the life of Ezra and Nehemiah. Last week was Ezra. This week I'm finishing up with Nehemiah. And I just really feel that this message is timely for where we are because there's a ton of people fighting. But not everything is productive. And I want to make sure that we're fighting for the right things and the right reasons. Chris Hodges recently told this story of a father and a son that were in a grocery store. They're walking down the aisles, and the son started throwing a temper tantrum, a big fit. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you. It's embarrassing. And so this kid's throwing a fit, and he's just starting to get worse, and he's crying and kind of screaming. And the dad's there saying, it's all right, Albert. It's going to be okay, Albert. Just calm down, Albert. You can do this, Albert. And the kid's getting worse, man. He's grabbing stuff off the shelves and off the cart. And he's throwing it, and he's raising his voice, and people are looking at him, and it's getting, at this point, a little bit awkward, And the dad's just sitting there, cool as a cucumber. It's okay, Albert. You can make it through, Albert. It's going to be fine, Albert. And a lady in the store walks up to him, and she looks at the dad, and she says, man, I want to commend you for just being so calm in the middle of this. I don't know what's going on in your life, but I just want to say that you have been so gentle and so nice to Albert. And he looks at her and he says, I'm Albert. So great. We live in a society that is getting really good at throwing fits, aren't they? And so many times we want to blame the fit on the kid and that it's the kid's fault for throwing a fit. But so many times, man, I look back and I go, but wasn't it the parents that taught them how to throw a fit or if it was okay to throw a fit? I Google searched just for fun this week because it's more fun than anything, right? How to deal with a temper tantrum. Just Google search, just a straight up Google search, how to deal with a temper tantrum. Of course, Google is not the Bible, and so they gave us these wonderful things. They gave us these top 7 points, which I almost would turn into top 7 jokes at this point, because when you take this idea of how to deal with a temper tantrum and then you just lay it over what's going on in our society, tell me this just doesn't make sense, right? Number 1, how to deal with a temper tantrum. Give them plenty of positive attention. Make sure that you give them plenty of good, positive attention. Number 2, right? Try to give the toddlers, some control over little things. This is how we're going to deal with temper. Just give them some control over little things. Number 3, I love this one. Keep off-limits objects out of their sight and reach. This is too good. I love it. Right? Number 4, distract your child. Distract them. Number 5, help the kids learn new skills. I really appreciate that one. Oh, I love it. What are we going to do when we defund the police? We're going to teach people new skills. So great. The best way to reduce a temper tantrum is to ignore it. Tell me we're not living in this society right now. Just ignore it. Don't worry. Let's teach them new skills. Number 7 is my personal favorite because I can't wait for this part to actually come in. But you need to praise the child when they have regained control. I can't wait. I just cannot wait for the moment that we get to praise everybody for regaining control. You did such a great job. Thank you for destroying everything during your tantrum and lighting everything on fire, but I'm just so proud of you that you've now regained control of your life. It did work eventually just to ignore the problem. Yeah, so when fit throwing and screaming and temper tantrums just aren't working, I wanted to offer an alternate solution. It's the idea behind this entire series, is to be able to give you a solution to say, all right, hey, listen, if what we're doing isn't working, if fit throwing isn't working, if screaming and yelling and lighting things on fire is not working, what should we be doing? And we take our lead, our guide from God's Word. And in every single generation, in every single book of the Bible, we continue to see over and over that God gives us wonderful tools to be able to deal with seasons just like this. This isn't an unprecedented season. In fact, so many people have previously gone through seasons just like this. Now, granted, it had a different name, and they used different verbiage. But the reality is that there is precedence in God's word for what you and I are going through today. And we can, just like Albert, keep it cool as a cucumber through this crazy time. And I think that God's people have the ability to actually thrive during seasons just like this. This is the time in which the light gets lighter and the dark gets darker. When you see things going bad and going haywire and going the wrong way, when you have the Holy Spirit inside of you, when you live with hope and help and peace, we have the ability to not just make it through, but to help so many people around us. This is what we're seeing, is that, you know what? As Christians, God has given us the answers. And in fact, it's our job to live out everything that he's calling us to do. The life of Ezra, as we hit last week, serves as a reminder that we have to win first in the spiritual. That no matter what you think you're going through, that there is a spiritual proponent behind everything. I know we want to say that it's a conspiracy and it's a political, scheme and all this stuff is going on. But the reality is, as Christians, we already know something smells funny. We already know that there's something going on behind the scenes, and it's not political. It's spiritual. And so what we have to do is we have to model our lives after Ezra, which is what we talked about last week. And when Ezra was confronted with the sin of his nation, he fell to his knees and he raised his hands and he confessed for the sin of his nation and his people. And so we know that if we're going to win in a spiritual battle, we're going to have to be just like Ezra. We're going to have to drop to our knees and confess our sin, even the sin we haven't committed, but our generation has. The sin of compromise and the sin of intertwining our lives so much. We need to learn to pray and humble ourselves and confess. And it is only through Jesus Christ that we are going to win this battle. There is no other alternative. There is no sit and wait program. You're going to have to engage yourself. You're going to have to stand up. You're going to have to get up in the morning and say, I'm here. I'm ready. God, what can I do? God, I'm ready to rebuild. I'm ready to make his house and his people priority. I'm ready to help those around me that so desperately need help. And I love this, Ezra, when they confessed their sin, as we learned last week, they came to him and they asked this question, what must we do? Ezra says this, you need to separate yourselves. Peter in Acts chapter 2 says this, you need to repent, which means to walk away. It's time to walk away from all of this. Paul says this, and this is one of my favorites, in Romans 2:12. I want to have it up here on the screen for you, this. Paul says this, do not copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you, say it with me, think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. What you believe, what you think really matters. It does. As much as you want to say it's about how we act these days, it's not. Because you act based off what you think. And we've determined that there are some fault lines in our generation, in our community, in which we don't think correctly. And that thinking has led us to build programs and led us to build even like ideas around false beliefs. And when those beliefs are tested, and the rain comes and the wind comes, what we find is there are sections of our lives and sections of our country that are completely falling apart because we didn't build it right. And it all started with how we think. I just love this. We have to learn as his church to think and to act differently, to learn to separate ourselves and create a boundary. A boundary not necessarily in walls around your property, but a boundary in how you believe, how you choose to believe. And we choose to believe God's word, which in this time, through all the shaking, hasn't been affected. You want to come out on solid ground? Start building your life in the right direction. Because there are so many people that put their word, put their life on his word, and they're not shaken during this time. But they're watching everyone else fall. I want to remind you, God's word works. His plan for you is good. And it works. And there is a way for you to make it through this season, not just survive this season, but to thrive. And could you believe it? Could we even think that we could get through it with joy? That's my hopes. My hopes is to be at the end of it and say, wow, what an incredible time where I didn't just focus on me. The life of Nehemiah. I want to show you what Nehemiah looked like. This is an accurate depiction. I know last week I got so much flack for the one last week. You guys, come on. I'm just trying to break a little religion off you. And this is how I see Nehemiah. And that's just, once again, I'm the one telling the story. So you tell the story, you get to pick the pictures. How's that? And until then, you got to put up with mine. Nehemiah is an incredible man. In fact, as a leader of my home, as a leader of a business, as a leader of a community, as a leader of even this house and this church, man, I find such great encouragement and courage from Nehemiah. Nehemiah was one of those guys that's just like, no matter what pressed on him, he never gave up. He never stopped. He never changed his focus. He wasn't diverted in anything. He 100% was totally focused on what the Lord had put inside of his heart. And he says, I'm going to be true to what God has asked me to do, my calling. And each and every one of us can learn from Nehemiah. I love his story. So quickly, I want to give you the story of Nehemiah and pull some good stuff out of it and maybe even let it challenge our life today. To ask this question, is there something I can take away today that I can walk away and say, you know what? I need to do this. I need to grow in this area. I need to make sure that I'm moving forward in these areas. So Nehemiah chapter 1 and chapter 2 is this, and I'm going to sum it up for you. If you later want to go home and read it, you can in entirety. I'm going to give you pieces and sections of it and tell it as a story. But chapters 1 and 2, Nehemiah finds himself as a cupbearer. He's still living in Babylon, and which is the nation that had taken them captive, and he's there hanging out. What happens is one of his brothers comes back from Jerusalem and gives him the same report that, as we heard last week, Ezra just got. Ezra got this report, and he completely was broken. And so one of Nehemiah's brothers comes to visit him, and he says, tell me, what's going on in Jerusalem, and what's happening in Jerusalem? And he just kind of like lets it all out. The nation is not doing well. Although the temple is rebuilt, he said the people are in ruins, and the walls are in ruins, and the gates are in ruins. And the reality is that although we may have been given the idea of freedom, our people aren't living free. They're still completely intertwined with the surrounding nation. So at the same time Ezra is leading a spiritual battle in Jerusalem, Nehemiah is getting reports that stuff is not working, that they have no defense system, no boundary. There's no distinction, like in Romans 12:2. There's no distinction. They all live the same customs, and they all believe the same and think the same. And there's no distinction between God's people and the people of Babylon. And so Nehemiah is completely distraught. If you read through Nehemiah chapter 1, it is an incredible story where he has the exact same story as Ezra. It says that when he heard this report, it says he fell on his knees and he cried out to the Lord, God, I confess my sins and the sins of my people. And he had the exact same response that Ezra had, except for he's in Babylon. And he cries out, God, would you please forgive us? Lord, would you please restore us as a people? Lord, would you forgive us for all the sin of intertwining, the sin of not living free and doing what you've called us to do? And he actually has this repentance moment while thousands and thousands of people are having that moment in Jerusalem. It's incredible to see what the Holy Spirit does in both areas, his response to this absolute depravity. In fact, the story, chapter 1 and 2, is that he's so overwhelmed for the first time, and this is amazing, for the first time in his entire career of working for the king notices that he's sad. Could you imagine if when you came in because your heart was distraught, your boss looked at you and said, I've never seen you upset. I've never seen you moody. And he wasn't sick. He was sick in his heart. And he carried this. It said he carried it for a couple months. And finally the king looked at him and said, hey, what in the world's going on? And he explained to them, although you've given us right and freedom to go and rebuild our nation, we still live as slaves. We have no boundaries, and we're being oppressed by the people there. And he's just struggling because he says, listen, like the king has given us an edict saying you're free, go and rebuild. But the reality is that we don't feel free. We don't act free. There's still, the walls are in ruins, the gates were burned. And although the temple is rebuilt, nobody even really worships because they haven't rebuilt as a people. They had only rebuilt the building. It's interesting. God's church is not a building. It's you. We know this in the New Testament. In fact, God calls you the temple, and he calls us the church. And there was a time in history where the temple was intact, but the church wasn't. If we cannot see a plan against the church today, we're missing it. Because the people are still very much alive, the temple. But it's this church that's coming under pressure. Nehemiah has this heart, and he asks the king, he says, hey, listen, would I be so bold? Could you send me? I'm going to go see if I can help. And the king says, yeah, sure, what do you want? And of course, anytime somebody says that, make sure you ask for money. Huh? Don't be stupid and say nothing. And so Nehemiah, being a smart man, he looks at him and he says, I need money. I need all the wood for the gates. I want to rebuild the walls. I have something on my heart that the Lord's asking me to do. Would you let me go and would you pay for it? And he says, of course I would. How long will you be gone? He says, I don't know. Okay, sweet. So next time your boss asks you how much vacation you want, the answer is indefinitely. A lot. I don't know when I'll be back. I'm just putting in my request day off, but I don't have a request come back yet. Unless you work here at the church, the answer is no. But you can try and get away with it, just not with me. And I love this. Nehemiah leaves, and he goes to go and inspect. And now what we're doing is we're in chapter 2. He shows up, and he actually gets the report of the leaders. He finds out what's going on. And I love what he says. He said, I told no one what God had placed in my heart. I didn't tell anyone. What I wanted to do is I wanted to go and see for my own self, with my own eyes, exactly what was happening. And what he does is he goes and he takes just a few people with him, and they actually go out at night during a full moon, and they inspect the walls so that nobody can see what's going on in the middle of the night. And they look at the walls and they realize that the walls around the temple have completely been destroyed. What happens is there's no barrier, there's no distinction between the people of God and the people of the land. And in fact, although they had been said you're free, there was no freedom because there was no actual boundary to establish peace in their home. There was no boundary to establish worship in their home. They were still subject in slavery to the people around them. And Nehemiah in his heart said, hey, listen, like it is on my heart. So he to rebuild this thing and to create a distinction between the people of God and the people who had them in slavery. To actually just create a little barrier to say, hey, listen, no longer will I be a slave. No longer will I have to say yes to you. I can make my own decisions within the boundary that we've permitted. And he goes to the leaders and he even says, he gets them all excited. And he said, let's rebuild the wall. Let's rebuild this thing and let's do this. So they come together and he even says this, let us rebuild. And he gets all of his people together and they get this idea and create a plan. We're going to rebuild the walls and we're going to create a barrier between us and them, a separation so that, and I love this because the heart behind it wasn't just so that they could be free, it's so that they could actually live in holiness. When God was calling them to live in holiness, they knew it wasn't possible because they had so intertwined their lives into the culture around them. And the word holiness means to separate from. You cannot be holy unto the Lord by living in the way of the thinking of the world, the manners and the customs of the world. The only way to live holy to the Lord is by separating yourself from this culture and starting to soak up this one. But you can't do that if you don't have boundaries. And what's interesting is that at the destruction of the temple, I believe it was in 586, the people of God didn't just lose their homes, they became slaves. And slavery is something that the Lord feels really serious about. In fact, if you read his word, you're going to find time and time and time again, he is so serious about slavery. He's so serious that he created you free. He wants you free. Now, we use this all the time in Growth Track, which is it's kind of an introduction to our house, who we are, who you are, and how you can be a part. If you go through that or you've gone through that, you're going to hear this said all the time. We believe that your journey in Christ consists of these 4 things, and I have them up here. The first one is to know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. This is our journey in Christ, and it starts with connecting with the Lord. Giving your heart and your life to him, having an experience with him where you say, God, I give you everything. And the moment you give your heart in salvation, a process starts in you, all 3 of these things simultaneously. He wants to get you free. Because whether you believe it or not, whoever is master over you is the one that you obey. And so if you are mastered, or if you're a slave to sin, or a slave to anxiety, or a slave to drugs and addiction, or a slave to those things, they dictate your response. He doesn't just want to save you, he wants to free you. And over again in every single book of the Bible, he just reinstates it. I mean, look at the amount of energy and frustration he went to just to get his Israel out of Egypt. But now even this, his idea, his heart is not just to come in and say, perfect, you can reestablish and your heart is with me. That's totally great. But he understands if you're going to serve God, if you're going to live holy unto God, you have got to walk through the process of finding freedom in your life. Each and every one of us. Now, God is unabashedly and totally, madly in love with you. And his desire is to save you, but he's also unabashedly and totally committed to your freedom. On all levels, financially, in addiction, in relationships, in oppression, in sin. And so it's not just this idea of like America freedom or 4th of July or wear a cool shirt or like, hey, listen, I live in a free country. That's not the freedom we're talking about. The freedom we're talking about is freedom from sin. Freedom from oppression, freedom from the addiction and guilt and shame. Freedom so that you can have a choice to love. If you are a slave to addiction, if you're a slave to oppression, or you're a slave in any way, shape, or form, you are not free to take your love and hand it to God. And so he knows that. And he knows that we make choices and decisions. We live in a community and a culture that is slave to everything else. Whether you believe it or not, or whether you see it or not, we are just slaves. Slaves to our phones, and slaves to the media, and slaves to our jobs, and we're slaves to so many things. We're slaves to debt. America is we're one of the countries that just loves debt. Loves debt. A lot of other countries don't build like we do. We love slavery. And we subject ourselves in addiction, we subject ourselves in oppression, and we continue to subject ourselves to masters that make decisions for us. And when God comes to connect with you in your heart, he knows, I have got to get you free. Because you won't be able to love me, serve me, and worship me unless you're free. When you are a slave, you obey your master. And we know this. You're only free to worship when God alone is your master. And so Nehemiah's heart is not just to see the people of God know God, just to have a moment of repentance and confession, but to actually get to a place where they start to pursue freedom. But we know this, there's no freedom without a fight. You just can't find it in history. I hear it on the news. I hear that we can be free without a fight, but as someone who loves history, has been studying it for years, went to college to study one book, history, and all things surrounding it wasn't that boring. The reality is whether you believe this or not, I would challenge you to find me some form of history where freedom came without a fight. Because slavery has to do with sin, and sin doesn't want to let go of you. And so we have to start pursuing a battle in the spiritual, but we also understand that there's going to be some natural consequences to the spiritual decisions that we are making. And the moment you start pursuing God and actually giving him your heart and mind and saying, God, lead me into freedom, and God, help me create a pure and a clean heart so that you can come, so that I can actually live what you're calling me to do. There's going to be a fight for your life, whether you like it or not. And so what we see in the book of Nehemiah, as we see Nehemiah sets out to lead his people, his nation, his friends, and his family into freedom. And at the exact same time, there are people that rise up right next to him to fight him for that. They don't want Israel free. Sin doesn't want you free. Sin wants you enslaved. And so when you start to pursue freedom, which is what we believe 100%, God is leading all of us on a journey for it. And here's the thing. It's not like a journey like, I love this, to know God and to meet him, to have a moment of salvation. It's a moment where you say, God, I give my heart to you. But that moment is a catalyst to the rest of the decisions in your life. And the same thing in finding freedom. Finding freedom isn't like, woohoo, I got saved and then everything went away. I don't have any more like addictions or sin or oppression. Like I'm not struggling with anything. The moment I said yes to Jesus, it just magically got better. I don't even get a free pass from that. And if there was a free pass, I'd ask for it. But the reality is, you finding freedom isn't done in a day. It's a process in your life in which you have to understand that the more I pursue freedom to love and worship and serve the Lord, the more sin and oppression would desire to really, really come after me. And so here's what we see in Nehemiah. And what an incredible time. It says this, Nehemiah 2:18-20, which is this verse I want to read here to you. It says this, Then I, this is Nehemiah, told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me and about my conversation with the king who paid for everything and sent me on this vacation. And if you read it, actually built him a house. Well done, Nehemiah. Right? And they replied at once, yes, let us rebuild the wall. So they began the good work of finding freedom. Then this happened. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, the Arab, heard of the plan, then this is the leaders of that area. So they obviously mobilized people around them, right? They scoffed contemptuously. What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king, they asked? It's interesting that the word scoffed, it actually means like they looked down on and they started to make fun of. So this is what happens. The moment you start to move and take one step towards freedom, your addiction is just going to laugh at you. Your oppressors are going to laugh at you, and people are going to look at you and laugh at you and just be like, what are you doing? Do you have no idea what's going on? And I replied, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding this wall, but you have, and I love this, no share, no legal right or historical claim in Jerusalem. Well, that was a swift kick to the teeth. Well done, Nehemiah. And everybody else is standing behind him going, yeah, you say it, you know? Good idea. Absolutely amazing. Chapter 3 is this. The people of God set out to rebuild the walls and the gates to create a boundary, to start to create distinction. And Sanballat sets out with his people to start to create this. Now what happens is that in chapter 3, if you go through the whole chapter, I mean, it is phenomenal how fast these guys started working. And it goes through here, they started, and they named their gates by different names. So they started this, they rebuilt the sheep gate, and then they moved down to the Tower of 100. In fact, they're working in a circle, and it says then they dedicated it. They moved to another tower, and they continue on to the fish gate. Then what they did is they did another section of wall all the way to the old city gate, it's called. And they rebuilt the old city gate, and then from there they went down to what they call the broad wall, and they created more wall distinction. They're creating a big circle, another section of the wall. Then the valley gate, they repaired 1,500 feet of wall between the valley gate and the dung gate, which I'm assuming the dung gate was like the porta potty area. I don't know. And then from the dung gate, who wants that job, you know? Anyway, they go all the way to the fountain gate. They repair the wall in between, and they continue to make more repairs in between the wall and around the corner. They turn around. They repaired the section of the wall from there. Then they repaired additional section. And it goes on to this. We have more wall and more sections. Then what they did is they did what they call the water gate, all the way up to a tower, down to the horse gate. And then they repaired another section. They repaired another section of the wall to the inspection gate, and all the way back around to the sheep gate. All that to say, it's like, I could have summed that up probably in like 3 sentences. But the reality is that they worked really, really hard night and day to start rebuilding this wall. And it says they got to a point where they actually had built the wall halfway up. So they reestablished the complete border, and it was only halfway in the air, which means you could still walk across it. And in fact, they didn't even have the bars or the gates. They only built the terrace around where the gate would go. They didn't have the actual gates on yet. And they just flew they flew full sprint. All right, here's what we're doing. And what they did, and I loved what Nehemiah did, is he actually said this. He didn't say, "All right, listen, everybody, we got to work in a giant circle." He said, whatever section of the wall or gate is closest to you is where you're going to work. So every person walked out their front door. They walked a few steps, and then they started building right in front of them. They weren't asked to build for their neighbors. They were asked to build for themselves, their family, and the people right next to them. And when everybody started working in a full circle, all of a sudden, they did this inspection. They just started working all the way around and rebuilding this and that. They get half of it done. And I love this. Nehemiah 4:1 says this. Now that they can see progress, Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. It says this, he flew into a rage. It went from mocking to you're in trouble now. You're in deep, deep trouble right now, right? And he started mocking them. It got more serious. It went from just this casual, descending, you look bad, I don't like you, to flew into a rage. Everything in him yelling and screaming and mad. And now he knows, listen, you are actually trying to create distinction between us. Sanballat didn't want them to live free. Why? Because he was the leader of that area that was still oppressing those people. He didn't want them to regain control of their life. He wanted to control them. And so all of a sudden, he just gets livid and mad and upset. And they get the job halfway done. It says this in 4:6. I'm going to read this section to you too. It says, at last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city. For the people worked with enthusiasm. They're excited. At this point, they're excited. And then all of a sudden, it says this. It says, but when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Amorites and the Ashdodites heard, I don't even know if I said that right, but I nailed it, that all the work was going on ahead and that there were no more gaps in the wall of Jerusalem that had been repaired, they were furious. And at this point, they can see that they actually might accomplish this. They actually might find freedom for themselves. They all made plans to come and to fight against Jerusalem and to throw us into confusion. And this is the moment where all of a sudden the people who are working with enthusiasm and making great, great progress, and they're like, man, I've been free for a week. I've been free for 2 weeks. I feel I can see freedom in my horizon. All of a sudden, there was a plan to come and attack them. And in fact, there was this just pressure of we're coming at any time. We're coming at any time. And the people went to Nehemiah and they're like, hey, listen, this is getting really real. We were just going to build a wall, but now we actually might be in a war. So we said yes to the wall, but we were not really excited or ready for war. But if you want to find freedom, you better expect to fight. You want to get free? You're going to have to fight for it. And I love what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah, he comes and he gets everybody together. He inspires them again, and he says this. He says, we are going to complete the job and the task in which we've set out to do. So here's what's going to happen. Every single person, when you take your tools to go to work, you're going to put a sword on your hip, and you're going to be ready at any moment. And I know that you're tired, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to have someone stand behind you, protecting you and watching over you while you work. And then at break time, we're going to switch. And you start working while somebody, your brother and sister in Christ, your brother and sister in your community, someone who cares for you and is fighting for freedom as well next to you, that loves you, is going to be there helping you, watching over you. And then there's going to be a time in which that changes. And you no longer aren't the one being watched and helped, you're the one watching and helping. And each person served right outside of their wall with their neighbors. And they learned not just to work with their neighbors, but they learned what it was to help their neighbor succeed, to protect their neighbor, to watch over their neighbor. I'm for you. I got this. Don't you worry about this. This is one of the beauties of the kingdom of God. If you've seen it in any form of practice, when all of a sudden you see someone else within the community come and just protect and love someone else. There's a beautiful, God created his church and his community so well. I really love that. When you can see people come around them and say, hey, listen, I can see that you've been taken advantage of. I can see that you're under attack. I can see that you're hurting. I'm here for you. I'm here right now. What can I do? And I'm going to watch over you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make sure that you're fine. Nehemiah never, ever, 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 ever stopped working. Even during the threats Even during the people yelling at him and screaming at him and all of the name calling, he was so focused on what God had called him to do. And he continued to keep every worker. But he knew this, that there was a plot, not just to get you discouraged, but the plot was to get you to stop. The plot was to get you to stop moving forward on this progress. If I could just get you to stop. Because what happened when they were rebuilding the temple? Sanballat, the same exact guy, pushed and pushed and pushed. And in fact, he was able to get them to stop working for 7 years. Sanballat knew, if I could just get you to stop, it'll slow your progress. It'll discourage you. I can discredit you. I can continue to rip you apart. If I could just get you to stop, that's what I want for you. And then my favorite chapter in all of Nehemiah is chapter 6. And I'm going to read this to you because it's just very well written. And it's worth a read. Sanballat, Tobiah, hold on, where am I starting on? I'm starting on 1-9. Okay. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies found out that we had finished rebuilding the wall and that no gaps remained. This is, remember, to the half height. Though we had not yet set up the doors in the gates, so Sanballat sent a message asking me to meet him at once in the village of the plain of Ono. That was his first mistake. This is my favorite. When I read that, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. It's named the plain of Ono. Yeah, here, come with me. We're going to meet in Ono. Right? And I realized that they were plotting to harm me. It says this. So I replied by sending this message to them. I'm engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent the same message over and over, just berating him. Each time I gave the same reply. The 5th time, Sanballat's servant came to me with an open letter in his hand, and this is what it said. There's a rumor among the surrounding nations and Gershom. Tell me that it is true, that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are rebuilding the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be their king. He also reports that you have been appointed prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim about you. Look, there is a king in Judah. You can be very sure that this report will get back to the king. So I suggest, these are threats, I suggest that you come and talk to me in the valley of Ono. I replied, and I love this, there's no truth in any part of your story. You are making the whole thing up. We call that fake news. And let me tell you what fake news wants to do to you. They're just trying to intimidate us, imagining that the church could be discouraged and that we would stop the work. So what's our response as his church? So I continued the work with even greater determination. That scripture sits in my spirit. And I know that there is truth and validity. I know that there is all kinds of stuff going on in our culture today. I'm not saying everything's a lie, but I am saying this. I know in the spiritual, there's something to try and get you to stop. Please just stop meeting. Stop being the church. Stop preaching the gospel. Stop. There's something that is trying to get you to stop. And I can tell you this in my spirit. I have seen this from the very, very beginning. There is no truth in the stuff that is being said about his church. And I love this. You are simply trying to intimidate us and trying to discourage us. How many of you, don't raise your hands, I'm just going to take it as all of you, have felt intimidated or discouraged in this last season? You kidding me? If that's not the plan, to completely discourage you, intimidate you, why? To get you to stop. And so my response as a leader, as a pastor, as the leader of my home with my kids, I'm going to continue to work with even greater determination because I know that the Lord has called us to something so valuable, that his church is the hope of the world. And without his church, our world will continue to crumble and crumble and crumble. If we stop, the good news stops. And the only thing to replace it is bad news or fake news. And his house and his church and his people are worth fighting for. Proverbs 28:1 says this, the wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Do you know why the wicked flee? Perceived threat. How many decisions have you and I made in the last 6 months that were based off of perceived threats? But the righteous are as bold as a lion. And Nehemiah not only modeled it, he taught the people around him, be bold, stand firm, stand right outside your house. Make sure that you create a distinction and a barrier between you and your family. Because whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, there are people coming up around you and behind you that find freedom in the freedom that you experience. And every time you gain more freedom, you actually help those around you. I wonder how many decisions that we've made since March that were based off of perceived threats. Nehemiah says this in Nehemiah 6:11, should someone in my position run from danger? The answer is no. How many people have given up and gotten discouraged in this last season from fake news? How many of us have been drawn out to the valley of Ono and discredited? There's a plot against your life to discourage you, to get you to stop pursuing all that God has for you. How many of us have found ourselves in that valley of Ono? How many of us in these last several months have run and hid? And how many of us have believed in the lies and just completely given up on 2020? How many of us, and what's sad to me is how many people I've watched lose hope. The message of the gospel, the message that's been placed inside of you and inside of me, is a message of hope. And that's a message that's not worth giving up on. Because your friends, your neighbors, your family, your kids, your coworkers, our communities, our state, this nation needs hope. And remind yourself, you're the one who has it. If you stop working, we lose it. Our response is to continue the work with even greater determination. And the work that we have on our heart, what we feel God's calling us to do, is to continue to walk through our journey in the process of knowing God, finding freedom, discovering purpose, making a difference in our community, continuing to move forward. And it's not just my journey, it's what we all get to do together and intertwine our journeys. So when I find freedom, you find freedom. When you discover a new piece of who you are and you become to play, and you come and you play and you're part of God's body, we get a new expression and a new feeling of God's body. We all have one body and many parts. And so what happens is when you determine who God's called you to be, we benefit. And we get to make a difference. Just even, granted, some of the stuff we're doing, I know for some it's not huge, but for me it's huge because we haven't stopped the work. Like, what was it, just a few weeks ago, we wrote a $10,000 check to Children's Cup to help feed kids down in Honduras, but also to help them find Jesus and help them find hope. They were locked together. They were locked down on martial law. Now there's a place where we're able to get in and help them and be a part of that. We are helping make a difference in our communities and in the world. That's not, like I said, maybe big to some, but I know Dan, the director of Children's Cup, he called me and he just said, Ben, nobody's doing this. Nobody's doing this right now. We are. We are. The majority of churches are still not meeting. And national average, not just national, let me bring it down to you. Oregon average. Only 30% of people actually walking back into the church doors. How many people have jumped out of the fight? My encouragement to you, let's not jump out of the fight. Let's not lose hope. God has a plan for your freedom, and I'm going to encourage you to not give up on the process. If it gets harder, grab a sword. Remind yourself that there's an enemy out there that wants to discourage you and discredit you. Your enemy will not stop. Your oppressor, your addiction, the things that you struggle with, and the surrounding community will not stop until you are discouraged, discredited, They're going to stir up chaos and noise. They're going to try and frustrate you. Guess what? They're going to lie about you. They're going to lie about the church. They're going to lie to you. They're going to get angry at you. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to throw a fit. But I want to encourage you, don't lose hope. No matter what happens in this next season, continue to pursue holiness. Rachel, would you come up? I just want to sing the chorus of the bridge of Holy Spirit on the piano. Don't lose hope. In this season, if there's one thing you do, continue to pursue holiness and separation from the world in the way that you think. I want to encourage you to trust in God's word. It will never fail you. And when all life shakes crazy, you won't shake crazy. I want to encourage you not to run away and hide, because you're in a fight. And it's a fight for freedom. It's a fight to worship. And it's a fight for your life. The fight that I'm in is for a better future for my kids. We are all in a fight to find freedom from sin. And that fight is worth fighting for. I just want to tell you that peace and hope and joy are worth fighting for. Health and life are worth fighting for. Your kids, your family, your neighborhood is worth fighting for. This community and the people that we walk among, that we are with all the time, are worth fighting for. They need hope. And you have hope. And God's house and God's people is always worth fighting for. Please stay in the fight. Keep the hope. And connect with those around you to say, I need help right now. I'm working on this, but I need someone to watch over me and protect me. Let's pray. Jesus, we, your church, we pray that you would infuse us with courage, that you would encourage us to continue to press on even when we're discouraged, when we feel like we're losing, when we feel like it's chaos everywhere, when we feel like there's nothing we can do to move forward. Lord, would you come and bring hope? Help us stay in the fight and not stop, not set our tools down, not set your word down, not set truth down, not set all of these things down, but to be able to stand in the middle of all of this and say, God, we are here. We're here to love and to serve you. Lord, would you help us? And you have not left us alone. This isn't a fight that you're asking us to do by ourselves. You, the God of everything, creator of heaven and earth, are the one who comes and gives us the strength, the courage to stay in the fight. God, we love you, and we choose to stay in the fight, no matter how bad it gets. In Jesus' name.